The lunch rush at the Rustic Fig was a beautiful kind of chaos. Plates clattered, silverware chimed, and a steady hum of conversation filled the warm, bread-scented air. Sunlight streamed through the big front window, painting a bright rectangle on the worn wooden floor. In the middle of it all, she moved. Her name was Elena. At 22, she had the kind of steady focus that only comes from doing a difficult job well. She balanced 3 heavy plates up one arm, her other hand deftly holding 2 empty coffee mugs by their handles. She weaved between tables with a dancer's practiced grace, a small professional smile on her face. "Here we go, the chicken club for you, the salad with the dressing on the side, and the burger, extra pickles," she said, her voice clear and friendly. She set the plates down without a sound. Her feet, in their sensible black shoes, throbbed with a dull, constant ache. It was a Thursday, and Thursdays were always busy. But if her body was in the bistro, her mind was often somewhere else. As she scooped ice into glasses, her fingers would sometimes twitch, tapping a silent, complex rhythm against the chilled metal. When the espresso machine hissed, she sometimes heard a symphony behind the steam dot in the far corner. By the window, where the light was best, sat her favorite customer. She only knew him as Mr. Henry. He was an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, with a kind face, gentle eyes, and hair the color of polished silver. He came in every single Thursday like clockwork, always at 1:15 p.m. He'd order the same thing, the soup of the day, a side salad, and a glass of iced tea with lemon. He never looked at his phone. Instead, he'd pull out a thick, hardcover book, always a biography of some historical figure, and read quietly while he ate. He was polite, always asking how her day was going, and he listened to her answer. And every week, when she brought the check, he'd leave a tip that was far more generous than necessary, folded neatly under the little metal stand. It was a small, quiet kindness that had helped her make rent more than once. Today, as she cleared the empty plate from the table next to his eyes weren't on his book. They were looking past her, toward the back wall of the bistro. Following his gaze, Elena saw what he was staring at. The old piano dot, it was an upright piano, its dark wood finish scratched and dull with age. It mostly functioned as a large shelf for a dusty potted plant, a stack of vintage cookbooks, and a small blackboard advertising the dessert specials. A decorative relic, the manager called it. The last time it had been properly tuned was before Elena was born, she was sure. "Does anyone ever play that thing?" Mr. Henry asked, his voice a soft, curious rumble. Elena felt a familiar, tiny pang in her chest. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Oh, not really. Sometimes, if we have a special event, a musician friend of the owner might tinker with it. But mostly, it just sits there." She offered a small shrug, trying to sound casual. He nodded slowly, still looking at the instrument. "A shame. It has good bones. You can tell it was once something beautiful." "I think so, too," she said, the words coming out a little softer than she intended. She quickly straightened a napkin dispenser on his table. "Can I get you more tea?" "In a moment," he said. Then he looked directly at her. His eyes were a calm, intelligent blue. "You said not really. That suggests someone does play it, sometimes." Elena felt her cheeks grow warm. She had been caught in her own careful wording. She glanced around. The rush was dying down, and her other tables were settled. "Well," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, "I do. Sometimes. Before we open in the morning, when the place is empty and the sun is just coming through that window. I dust it. And sometimes dusting turns into playing for a minute or two, just to hear the sound." She immediately felt silly. A waitress playing a broken-down piano before her shift, but Mr. Henry didn't smile like it was silly. He looked interested. "What do you play?" Oh, anything. Bits of old songs my grandmother taught me. Things I hear and try to figure out. She didn't mention the 8 years of lessons her mother had scrimped and saved for, or the way her heart had shattered when she had to stop them at 16 to help with the bills. She didn't mention the thick books of classical sheet music that lived under her bed, pages worn soft from her fingers tracing the notes in the dark. He was quiet for a long moment, just looking from her to the piano and back again. The silence felt heavy, but not uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. "Play something for me now." Elena blinked. "Oh, no, sir. I couldn't. It's the middle of service, and I'm working, and it's probably terribly out of tune." He leaned forward slightly. "I'll make it worth your while. Let's call it a special request. A private concert." He gestured to the nearly empty restaurant. "The crowd has thinned. It seems like the perfect time." Her heart began to beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Play, now? In front of a customer, in her apron with her hair in a messy bun? She looked over toward the small service station, where her manager, a practical woman named Brenda, was counting receipts. "Brenda?" Elena called over, her voice tight. "The gentleman at table 4. He's asked if I could play a quick song on the piano. Is that all right?" Brenda looked up, glanced at Mr. Henry, a reliable, big-tipping regular, and shrugged. "Sure, why not? It's slow now. Just keep it short, okay? And maybe something cheerful." She gave a little wave and went back to her work. Elena was trapped. The permission was given. Mr. Henry was watching her, his expression patient and expectant. She felt a trickle of sweat run down her back. This was a terrible idea. She would sit down, hit a few sour notes, and ruin the quiet, professional relationship they had. The beautiful escape of her morning practice would become a public embarrassment. But another part of her, a part she kept locked away deep down, stirred. It was a hungry, longing part that missed the feel of weighted keys under her fingers, the vibration of music in her bones. That part was stronger than her fear. "Okay," she heard herself say, the word barely a whisper. Just one short one. She walked toward the piano, as if in a dream. The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. She could feel the eyes of the 2 remaining busboys. The cook leaning in the kitchen passed through, and of course, Mr. Henry. She set her order pad and pen down on top of the cookbooks and lifted the dusty fallboard, revealing a set of yellowed keys. She wiped her suddenly damp hands on her apron again and sat on the creaky, upholstered bench. She touched a middle C. The note hung in the air, a little flat, a little breathy, but it was a sound. It was real. She had planned to play something simple, something safe and cheerful, like Brenda wanted. A few bars of heart and soul, maybe. But as her fingers settled on the keys, something shifted. The noise of the bistro faded away, the clink of dishes, the murmur of the cook. All she could see were the black and white patterns. All she could feel was the memory in her hands. She took a deep, shuddering breath, closed her eyes for a second, and began to play, but it wasn't heart and soul. Her left hand laid down a deep, rolling, melancholic bass line, a series of complex chords that resonated in the piano's old belly. Then her right hand came in, not with a simple tune, but with a waterfall of notes, intricate and weeping and beautiful. It was Chopin. It was the Nocturne in C-sharp minor, a piece she had learned in secret, practicing the movements on her knees, on tabletops, until she could afford a cheap keyboard to play it properly. The music that filled the rustic fig was not the tinkling background noise of a restaurant pianist. It was raw, powerful, and full of a deep, aching longing. It spoke of late nights and lost dreams, of beauty found in dust and quiet corners. It was the sound of her story, pouring out through her fingertips without her permission. She forgot about Mr. Henry. She forgot about Brenda. Her aching feet, the unpaid electric bill on her kitchen counter. For 3 minutes, she was not a waitress. She was a vessel for the music. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. Her face, usually so carefully composed, was open and vulnerable, etched with the emotion of the piece as the final. Haunting notes faded into the quiet air. She opened her eyes. She was back in the bistro, back in her apron. A profound embarrassment washed over her. What had she done? That was too much, too personal, too sad for a Thursday afternoon. She slowly turned around on the bench. The 2 busboys had stopped wiping tables, their rags frozen in their hands. The cook was standing fully in the pass-through, arms crossed, a look of stunned respect on his face. Brenda had put down her pen. And every single person in the quiet restaurant, all 6 of them, was looking at her. Then one of the busboys started to clap. Slowly, softly. Brenda joined in, then the cook. It wasn't a roaring applause, but it was real, filled with a quiet awe. Elena's eyes finally found Mr. Henry. He wasn't clapping. He was just sitting there, his book forgotten. But the look on his face wasn't one of polite thanks. It was something else entirely. It was the look of a man who had been searching for something very specific, and had just, against all odds, found it. And then Elena noticed something strange. The 2 men sitting at the bar, who had been nursing beers and watching a game on the silent TV, were no longer looking at the screen. They had turned slightly on their stools, and each of them held a small, sleek, professional-looking camera in their hands, and the lenses of those cameras were pointed directly at her. The silence after the last note was the loudest sound Elena had ever heard. It wasn't an empty silence. It was thick and full, like the air just before a thunderstorm. Her own heartbeat thumped in her ears, a frantic drum against the quiet. She could feel the warmth in her cheeks, a fierce blush spreading from her neck to her forehead. What had she done? That piece was her private heartache, not something for a Thursday lunch special. The soft clapping from the busboy and the cook felt like pinpricks. It was kind, but it made the moment real, pulling her out of the music and back into the bright, unforgiving light of the bistro. She was sitting at a dusty piano in her work apron, and she had just poured her soul out for an audience of near strangers. Her eyes, wide and a little scared, found Mr. Henry. He wasn't clapping. He was just looking at her. His expression had changed from one of curious interest to something deeper, more intense. It wasn't a smile. It was a look of pure, undiluted recognition, as if he'd been handed a lost masterpiece he'd only read about in books. It was overwhelming. Then her gaze darted to the 2 men at the bar. The confirmation of what she'd half seen sent a cold jolt through her. They weren't hiding the cameras anymore. They were holding them steady, one aimed at her face, the other slowly panning across the room, capturing the reactions of the small staff. These weren't phones. They were professional video cameras, compact but serious, with big lenses that swallowed the light. The red recording dots glowed like tiny, unblinking eyes. A wave of confusion, sharp and nauseating, hit her stomach. This was a setup. It had to be. But for what? Was this some bizarre hidden camera show? Was she about to be laughed at on the internet? The beautiful escape of the music curdled into something ugly and exposed. She felt like a specimen under a glass. Before she could move, or speak, or even think of what to do, Mr. Henry stood up. He didn't stand like an older gentleman who just enjoyed a nice lunch. He stood with a sudden, natural authority that seemed to change the shape of the room. His gentle, bookish slouch was gone. His shoulders were square. He buttoned the middle button of his simple, well-made jacket a small, deliberate gesture that felt like an actor putting on his final costume. My sincerest apologies. He began, his voice different now. It was the same voice, but it had lost its soft, private rumble. It was clearer, firmer, meant to carry. It filled the quiet bistro effortlessly. I know the clandestine filming is alarming. Please don't be upset with your wonderful waitress. She had no idea. He took a few steps toward the center of the room, placing himself between Elena at the piano and the rest of the space. He was addressing everyone: Brenda, who was now frowning deeply, the cook, the busboys. He was calm, his hands open in a gesture of peace. My name, he said, is not Henry. Well, it's my middle name. My full name is Alistair Thorne. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. It meant nothing to Elena at first. Her mind was still spinning with panic. But she saw Brenda's jaw go slack. The cook let out a low, soft whistle, almost like he'd been punched in the gut. Alistair Thorne. The name clicked into place a second later. A piece of trivia from a news segment she'd half-watched while folding laundry. The tech billionaire. The one who'd made a fortune in something to do with data and then vanished from the public eye. He was famous for two things: being unbelievably rich and being completely, frustratingly private. No flashy interviews, no social media, no pictures in glossy magazines. Just a name on the bottom of huge charitable donations. This, Thorne continued, gesturing to the two cameramen who were still filming, is for a project my foundation runs. It's called Hidden Sparks. The idea is simple, and perhaps a little theatrical, I admit. We travel around, looking for extraordinary talent, living ordinary lives. We find it, we capture the genuine, unfiltered moment of discovery, just as it happens. He turned now fully to face Elena. The cameras followed his movement, the lenses focusing on her. She felt pinned to the piano bench. What we just witnessed, he said, and now his voice warmed, filling with a sincerity that cut through Elena's fear, was not someone just playing the piano. That was not a hobby. That was a story told through your hands, Elena. That was a gift. Hearing her name in that new, powerful voice was strange. He made it sound important. The Hidden Sparks Foundation exists for one reason, he announced, looking back at the small crowd before returning his gaze to her. To remove the barriers between a gift like that and the world. So here is our offer. He took another step closer. He pulled a simple, cream-colored business card from his inside pocket. But he didn't hand it to her yet. The foundation will provide you with a full-ride scholarship. This covers tuition, books, fees, everything to the conservatory or music school of your choice. Anyone in the country. We will also provide a generous living stipend. Enough for an apartment, for food, for you to focus on nothing but your music for the next 4 years. No more waitressing. No more splitting your focus. Just your art. The room, which had been holding its breath, erupted. Brenda clapped her hands over her mouth. One of the busboys whooped. The sound was deafening to Elena. It was like she was sinking under water. Their faces were blurry, smiling, shocked shapes. The offer hung in the air, shimmering and impossible. It was the answer to every silent prayer she'd ever whispered while counting her tips. Every sad glance at the piano under her bed. A way out. A way forward. Tears, hot and unstoppable, welled up in her eyes and spilled over. They traced clean lines through the faint dust on her cheeks from the piano. She couldn't speak. She could only stare at Alistair Thorne, this stranger who had just rewritten her future in 30 seconds. He walked the final few steps and placed the business card on the piano ledge next to her. It was thick, expensive paper. It just said Alistair Thorne and a phone number in simple, elegant type. Then, as the noise around them continued, he leaned in, very close. The cameras, she noticed, stayed back. This was for her ears only. His voice dropped back to that softer, more personal tone, but the words were like cold water. "There is a condition, Elena," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "The cameras are for the Hidden Spark series, yes, but they are also for a promotional contract. For 1 year, the Foundation will own the rights to this moment, this video, your story, your image from today. You will be the face of this season's Hidden Sparks. There will be interviews, appearances, branded content. We help you, and in return, you help us inspire others. It's a partnership. Think carefully before you say yes." He straightened up, giving her a small, almost sad smile, as if he understood the weight he had just dropped onto her shoulders. He gave her a final, firm nod, then turned and walked calmly toward the door. The 2 cameramen stopped recording, lowered their cameras, and followed him out, as smoothly as they had entered. Just like that. They were gone. The bell on the door jingled, and the bistro was suddenly violently normal again. The sunlight still streamed in. The smell of soup and coffee returned. But everything was different. Helena sat frozen, the thunderous applause of her coworkers washing over her. She looked down at the business card. It felt heavy. Her tears were still falling, but now they were mixed with a new, creeping feeling that was colder than fear, that it wasn't a fairy tale. It was a trade. Her once-in-a-lifetime chance had a price tag attached, and the cost was her own story. The bell over the door finished its jingle, and the quiet that followed was a physical thing. It pressed in on Elena's ears. The clapping and whoops from Brenda and the boys died down, replaced by a buzzing silence. She was still sitting on the piano bench, her fingers curled into stiff, cold claws on her lap. The business card lay beside her like a fallen leaf, stark white against the dark, scarred wood. "Elena? Honey?" Brenda's voice sounded far away. She appeared in front of the piano, her manager's face a mask of shock and dawning excitement. "Do you know what just happened?" That was Alistair Thorne. The guy could buy this city block before his coffee got cold. "And he wants to pay for school?" She reached out and grabbed Elena's hand. It felt limp. "This is it. This is your ticket." A ticket. Yes, that's what it was. A golden ticket, handed to her in a sunlit bistro. So why did her stomach feel like it was full of stones? I need a minute, Elena mumbled, pulling her hand back. She stood up, her legs wobbly. She picked up the thick card, not looking at it, and walked on unsteady feet toward the back hallway that led to the staff room and the restrooms. The eyes of her coworkers followed her, their whispers starting up behind her like the rustle of dry leaves. The staff room was a small, windowless space that smelled of old coffee and cleaning supplies. She slumped into a cracked vinyl chair, the one with the wobbly leg. She stared at the card. Alistair Thorne. A phone number. That was all. It was so simple. It promised everything. Her phone, in her apron pocket, buzzed. Then it buzzed again. And again. It didn't stop. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. Notifications flooded her screen. Text messages first. Asterisk, oh my God, Elena, I just saw the video. Asterisk, asterisk, video? What video? My cousin just sent me a link. Is that you? Asterisk, asterisk, you're famous. Call me. Asterisk, then the social media alerts. Tags, mentions, friend requests from people she hadn't spoken to since high school. Her thumb hovered over one notification. It was from a video sharing site. At Hidden Sparks official tagged you in a video. She tapped it. There it was. The video. Already posted, already edited. The title made her cringe. Asterisk, asterisk, billionaire discovers piano prodigy waitress. You won't believe her reaction. Asterisk, asterisk, it started with a shot of the dusty piano. Then a quick, smiling clip of Mr. Henry, asking his question. Then it cut to her. They'd used the moment she closed her eyes and took that deep breath. The music swelled. They'd cleaned up the audio, made it sound richer, clearer. They'd edited her performance tightly, showing the most emotional moments. Her focused face, her moving hands, a slow-motion shot of a tear she hadn't even felt tracing down her cheek. Then the reveal. Alistair Thorne's speech was cut from Maximum Drama, ending right on the big scholarship offer. The final shot was of her, sitting frozen at the piano, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. The video ended with the Hidden Sparks logo and a link to their website. It had been online for less than an hour. It already had over 200,000 views. Elena scrolled down. The comments were a torrent. Asterisk, crying in the club RN. So beautiful. Asterisk, asterisk. This is why I believe in humanity. Asterisk, asterisk. She's not even that good. Just lucky. Asterisk, asterisk. Where can I donate to her? Asterisk, asterisk, fake. So obviously staged. Asterisk, asterisk. What's her Instagram? Asterisk, she felt sick. They'd taken her 3 minutes of private, vulnerable music and turned it into a product. A feel-good meme, as the top comment called it. Her shock, her tears, it was all part of the package. This was the condition. Her life was no longer her own. It was a story owned by the Hidden Sparks Foundation. The door to the staff room creaked open. It was the cook, a big, quiet man with a kind face. He held out a slip of paper. Some lady from a TV news show just called the restaurant phone. Wants to talk to you? I told her you were busy. He gave her a sympathetic look. It's going to be a lot, kid. But it's a good lot, you know. Tried to see the good. He left, and the phone in her hand buzzed again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize with a fancy area code. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text popped up from the same number. Asterisk, Elena, this is Cynthia Vale from Morning Sunrise. We'd love to have you on the show tomorrow to talk about your incredible journey. We'll send a car. Asterisk, a journey. What journey? From the coffee machine to the piano? Her own dreams had always been quiet, personal things. To sit in a practice room for hours until a piece felt right. To maybe, one day, play in a small hall where people came just to listen. It was about the music. Now, it felt like it was about everything but the music. It was about the viral moment, the Waitress to Riches story, the branded content. The door opened again. It was Brenda, holding out the cordless restaurant phone. Her face was serious now. It's a man. Says he's a talent agent. Says it's urgent. Elena just shook her head, unable to speak. Brenda understood. She spoke into the phone. She's unavailable right now, and hung up. She came and sat in the other wobbly chair. Look, Brenda said, her voice softer now. This is crazy. But it's the kind of crazy people pray for. So what if they made a video? So what if some people are jerks in the comments? They're paying for your life, Elena. Your whole future. A few interviews, a smile for the camera. That's a small price, honey. A very small price. Elena knew Brenda was right, in a way. It was the practical, sensible view. Take the money, get the education, ignore the noise. But the feeling wouldn't leave her. It was the feeling of being swallowed. Her authentic moment, the one real, unplanned thing she had done for herself in years, was now a commodity. She had traded it. She thought about the contract Thorne had whispered about. We will own this moment and your story for 1 year. What did that mean, exactly? Could they tell her what to say? What to wear? Could they make her do cheesy commercials? The weight of it all crashed down. The guilt was the worst part. Who was she to feel anything but grateful? She thought of her mother, working a double shift right now at the hospital laundry. She'd call her soon, and her mother would cry with happiness. She would think all their struggles were over. How could Elena explain this hollow, scared feeling in her chest? It would sound spoiled, ungrateful. She stood up, her body moving on its own. I need some air, Brenda. I need to go home. Brenda nodded. Go. Take the rest of the day. Take tomorrow, too. Just be smart, okay? Call that number. Don't let this slip away. Elena gathered her things from her locker, her worn-out jacket, her backpack with the broken zipper. She walked out the back door of the bistro, into the alley. The normal sounds of the city felt strange. A dog barked. A car honked. The world was going on like nothing had happened, but her life had just been split into a before and an after. She walked the few blocks to her apartment building, her head down. In her tiny studio, the silence was a relief. She dropped her bag and looked at the space. The small second-hand keyboard was tucked under her bed, just visible. The stack of sheet music on her desk. This was her real life. Small, quiet, hard. She sat on the edge of her bed and finally picked up the business card. She turned it over. On the back, in the same elegant print, was an email address. contracts@hiddensparks.org. So this was it. The first step. Not a call to celebrate, but an email to a contracts department. She opened her laptop, its fan whirring loudly in the quiet room. She stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then she began to type, her fingers clumsy. Asterisk, Dear Hidden Sparks Foundation, asterisk, asterisk, this is Elena Martinez. From the Rustic Fig today. I don't know what to say. Thank you for the offer. It is more than I ever dreamed. Before I can say yes, I need to see the contract. I need to understand what owning my story means. Please send it to me. Asterisk, she hit send before she could change her mind. The reply came back in less than 10 minutes. It was as fast and efficient as the cameras had been. No personal note. Just a PDF attachment from a legal assistant. The subject line read, Draft Talent and Story Agreement, Elena Martinez. She opened it. It was 23 pages long, full of words like exclusive rights, brand licensure, moral rights waiver, and commercial utilization. She skimmed it, her heart sinking lower with each paragraph. They wanted the right to use her name, her likeness, and the narrative of the discovery event in any media worldwide for promotional purposes. She would be required to participate in up to 12 foundation-sanctioned media appearances in the first year. She could not give interviews to anyone else without their approval. Any music she created during the scholarship period, they would have first right of refusal to use in their projects. It wasn't a scholarship. It was a deal. She wasn't a student. She was a brand ambassador. Elena put her head in her hands. The tears came again, but they were different now. Not tears of shock or joy, but of a deep, confusing grief. She was mourning the simple, clean dream she'd carried for so long. The dream had just been handed to her, but it had been rewrapped in so much plastic and string that she wasn't sure she could find it inside anymore. She looked from the dense legal document on her screen to the simple, dusty keyboard peeking out from under her bed. The choice felt impossible. Say no and stay in this small, struggling life, forever wondering, what if? Say yes and step into a glittering cage where her music was no longer just hers. She had never felt more alone. The whole world was watching a video of her, talking about her, wanting a piece of her story. But nobody in that world could make this decision for her. The cameras were off now. This quiet, terrible. 3 days passed. They were the strangest, longest days of Elena's life. The video continued to spread, a digital wildfire she couldn't control. She stayed in her apartment mostly, the blinds drawn, living off toast and tea. Her phone was a constant buzzing enemy. She finally muted it, only checking it once in a while to see messages from her mother, all love and excitement, which made Elena feel worse, and Brenda asking gently if she'd made a decision. The draft contract sat on her laptop, a digital anchor. She'd read it a dozen times. She'd even tried to look up what some of the legal phrases meant, which only made her more anxious. It all came down to one thing. For a year, she would not belong to herself. Her story, her face, her journey, it would all be a tool for the Hidden Sparks Foundation. The practical part of her, the part that had budgeted tips for groceries, screamed that it was still a good deal. A free education. A way out. But the part of her that played the piano, the part that felt truly alive only when music was flowing through her, felt sick. That part whispered that if she started her new life as a character in someone else's story, she might never find her own voice. On the fourth morning, a new email arrived. It wasn't from the legal department. The sender was simply Athern. The message was short. Asterisk Elena. Asterisk asterisk. The Foundation's annual gala is this Saturday at the Grand Royal Hotel. It is where we celebrate our new sparks. Your attendance is expected as our guest of honor. A car will pick you up at 6 p.m. Formal attire will be provided. This is not optional per Clause 4B of the draft agreement. It will also be a good opportunity for you to see what this world looks like before you decide to enter it. Sincerely, Alistair Thorne asterisk Clause 4B. She found it. The talent shall attend all major Foundation events for the duration of the agreement. They were treating her as if she'd already signed. Expected and not optional felt like a shove. This was the first taste of the control they would have. Panic fluttered in her chest. A gala, with wealthy people and cameras. She had nothing to wear, no idea how to act. But the stubborn part of her that had gotten her through long shifts and hard years rose up. Fine. If this was a test, or a show of power, she would go. She needed to see it. She needed to look Alistair Thorne in the eye again. Saturday arrived like a storm. At exactly 5 p.m., a sleek, silent car pulled up outside her apartment building. A driver in a suit held the door for her. The box with the dress was already inside. It was a simple, elegant gown in a deep blue color. It fit her perfectly, as if they'd known her measurements. Looking at herself in the mirror of the car's dark window, she barely recognized the person staring back. She looked like someone playing dress-up as a spark. The Grand Royal Hotel was a world of glittering light, soaring ceilings, and the low hum of expensive conversation. Chandeliers sparkled like frozen fireworks. Everyone was beautiful and looked effortlessly comfortable. Elena felt like a ghost moving through a dream that wasn't hers. A young woman with a clipboard and a headset found her immediately. "Elena, we're so thrilled. I'm Chloe. I'll be your handler tonight. You'll be seated at Mr. Thorne's table. We'll bring you out after the main course for your presentation." "My presentation?" Elena asked, her voice small. "Oh, just a short speech about the Foundation's impact, and then your performance, of course." Elena's blood ran cold. Performance? No one said anything about a performance. Chloe's smile didn't waver. "It's in the run of show. You'll play the same piece from the video. It's what everyone is waiting for. The Cinderella moment." She patted Alana's arm. "Don't be nervous. The piano is a beautiful Steinway. You'll be amazing." She was ushered to a table at the very front. Alistair Thorne was there, surrounded by important-looking people. He saw her, gave her a polite, formal nod, and returned to his conversation. He was Mr. Thorne here, not the kind Mr. Henry from the bistro. He was the CEO of this whole production, and she was the newest product. The dinner was a blur. of flavors she didn't taste and conversations she couldn't join. People introduced themselves, their eyes bright with curiosity, not about her music, but about her story. "You must be pinching yourself," one woman gushed. "What a whirlwind," said another. They saw the video. They didn't see the girl who was drowning in it. As the dessert plates were cleared, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage where a grand piano stood, gleaming under the lights. The host, a famous news anchor, took the microphone. And now, the moment that embodies the spirit of hidden sparks, her voice boomed. "From a humble bistro to this grand stage, please help me welcome the young woman who touched all our hearts, Elena Martinez." Thunderous applause filled the ballroom. A spotlight swung and found her, blinding her. Chloe gently nudged her from behind. "Go on, go!" Elena walked to the stage, her legs like wood. The steps seemed to go on forever. She shook the anchor's hand, a smile frozen on her face. The anchor handed her the microphone. "Elena, tell us, how does it feel to have your life changed so completely?" Elena looked out at the sea of expectant, smiling faces. The teleprompter in front of her had a short, sweet script. Asterisk, "I am so grateful. This is a dream come true. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, for seeing the spark in me." Asterisk, she opened her mouth. The words wouldn't come. The hollow, sick feeling from her apartment was back, 10 times stronger. This was the cage, this shiny, beautiful, gilded cage. If she read those words, she was signing the contract with her voice. She lowered the microphone for a second. She took a shaky breath. The crowd hushed, thinking she was emotional. "It feels overwhelming," she said, her voice cracking at first, then finding a little strength. "The last week has been confusing. The music I played that day, it came from a quiet place, a real place. I'm grateful for the chance, but I'm still learning what it all means." It wasn't the script. She saw a flicker of concern in the anchor's eyes, then a professional smile. "Well, let's hear that beautiful music again. Ladies and gentlemen, Elena Martinez." The applause erupted again as she turned to the piano. She sat on the plush bench. The Steinway was a beast of an instrument, perfect and powerful. She placed her hands on the keys. They felt alien. She was supposed to play the Chopin, to recreate the viral moment, neat and packaged for this wealthy audience. Her fingers touched the keys. She started the first, familiar notes of the nocturne. The rich, perfect sound of the piano filled the hall. But as she played, it felt like a lie. She was a mimic, a recording. This wasn't her music anymore. It was theirs. Halfway through the first page, her hands stumbled. A wrong note rang out, harsh and obvious in the perfect acoustics. A tense silence fell over the ballroom. She stopped playing, her heart hammered against her ribs. She could run off the stage. That's what she wanted to do. But she looked out, and in the front row, she saw Alistair Thorne. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching, intently. There was no anger in his face, just that same deep focus. Something in her broke, and then something else hardened. If this was her one moment on this stage, she would not leave as a broken puppet. She would leave as herself. She leaned toward the piano's microphone. Her voice was small but clear in the dead quiet. "I'm sorry. That piece, it belongs to a different me. A me from last week." She took her hands off the keys, then placed them back down in a different position. She closed her eyes. And she began to play something else, Dot. It was not a famous classical piece. It was something she had been fiddling with for months in her apartment. It started with a rhythmic, repetitive pattern in the left hand, like the steady, relentless ticking of a clock, or the sound of her own shoes on the bistro floor. The right hand came in with a higher, searching melody, sometimes hopeful, sometimes sad, often clashing with the rhythm underneath. It was modern, a little messy, full of odd harmonies and sudden shifts. It was the sound of the last week. The confusion, the fear, the wonder, the pressure. It was the sound of a whirlwind from the inside, that it wasn't neatly beautiful like the Chopin. It was complicated and real. For a minute, the audience was utterly still, unsure of what they were hearing. This wasn't the feel-good story. This was the truth. She poured everything into it. The exhaustion, the loneliness of her apartment, the weight of the contract, the dizzying hope of the scholarship. The music built, growing more intense, the two hands fighting, and then finally finding a shaky, unresolved kind of peace. It ended not with a big, final chord, but with a few single, spaced-out notes that faded into nothing, like a question hanging in the air. She lifted her hands. The silence was absolute. Then, from the back of the room, one person started to clap. Then another. It wasn't the roaring, excited applause from before. It was slower, deeper, more respectful. People were standing up. Not everyone, but many. They weren't clapping for a Cinderella story. They were clapping for the musician who had just shown them her guts instead of a fairy tale. Elena stood, her legs trembling. She gave a small, awkward bow and walked off the stage. The anchor looked stunned, but moved to fill the silence with smooth words. Backstage, in the dim chaos of wires and waiting staff, she found him. Alastair Thorne was waiting for her, away from the others. She expected anger. A lecture about going off script. He looked at her for a long moment. The showman was gone. The Mr. Henry kindness was back in his eyes. The moment in the bistro was real, Elena, he said, his voice low. The quiet backstage area felt more real than the glittering ballroom ever had. The air was cooler, smelling of dust and electrical cables. Elena could still hear the muffled sound of the host wrapping up the event, the polite applause from the crowd. Her hands were cold, but inside, a small, steady flame was burning, where before there had only been icy fear. Alastair Thorne's words hung in the air. Asterisk, you can renegotiate. You have power now? Asterisk, did she? She had just defiantly played an unknown, messy piece instead of the viral hit 1,000 people had come to hear. She had broken the script. That could easily be seen as ungrateful, as throwing his generosity back in his face. The car waiting outside could just as easily take her home for the last time. But he hadn't looked angry. He'd looked impressed, or maybe just interested, like he was watching a complicated experiment unfold. Her handler, Chloe, found her, her earlier polished smile replaced by a flustered confusion. Well, that was unexpected. The car is ready when you are. There was no talk of meeting donors or doing a press line. The night, for her, was clearly over. The ride back to her apartment was silent. The driver didn't say a word. The beautiful blue gown felt like a costume again. As soon as she was inside her own door, she tore it off, hung it carefully over a chair, and put on her soft old sweatpants and a t-shirt. The familiar fabric was a relief. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at her small keyboard, the one with the slightly chipped middle C, and she played her own piece again, the one from the gala. It was different now, quieter, less frantic. It had said what it needed to say. Now it was just a piece of music, hers to change and grow. When the sun came up, she made a pot of strong coffee. She felt clear-eyed in a way she hadn't for over a week. The fear of losing the opportunity was still there, but it was no longer a screaming panic. It was a fact to be weighed. What was the point of an opportunity that required you to disappear? At 10 o'clock, she opened her laptop. She didn't open the daunting contract. Instead, she opened a new email. She addressed it to Alastair Thorne. Mr. Thorne. Thank you for the invitation last night. And thank you for your words backstage. I have thought about nothing else. Asterisk, asterisk, I want the scholarship more than I can say, but I cannot sign the contract as it is. I cannot be a character for a year. The music I played last night is who I am, messy, unfinished, and my own. If the foundation is willing to support that person, and not just the story from the bistro, then I would be honored to accept. Asterisk, asterisk, I am not a business person. I don't know how to renegotiate. But here is what I need. Asterisk, asterisk 1. I want to choose my own school, and my studies to be private. No cameras in the practice room. Asterisk, asterisk 2. I will do interviews about the Foundation's mission, but I will tell my own story, in my own words. No pre-written scripts. Asterisk, asterisk 3. Any performance I do for the Foundation must include my own music. If I choose, asterisk, asterisk 4, the story rights last for 1 year, but after that, my story and my music belong to me again. Asterisk, asterisk, if this is not possible, I understand. I will be back at the bistro on Thursday. Either way, thank you for hearing me play that first time. Sincerely, Elena Martinez asterisk. She read it over 3 times. Her hands were shaking. It felt terrifyingly bold. She was a waitress making demands of a billionaire. But she pressed send. The reply came in less than an hour. It was 2 lines. Asterisk, Elena, come to the Foundation offices tomorrow at 3 p.m. We will talk. At asterisk, the offices of the Hidden Sparks Foundation were in a sleek, modern building downtown, but the floor she was directed to felt more like a quiet library than a bustling corporation. There were books on shelves, not just screens on desks. A calm assistant led her to a small conference room with a view of the city. Alistair Thorne was already there, sitting at the table with a folder in front of him. He was dressed casually in a simple sweater. He looked more like Mr. Henry than he had at the gala. Sit, please, he said, not unkindly. She sat, her back straight. Your email was direct, he began. It lacked professional polish. He paused. I found that refreshing. You asked for 4 things. I can give you 3. Elena's heart sank, but she kept her eyes on his. You will choose your own school. Your studies will be your own. No cameras. That is non-negotiable for us. 2, we are not in the business of ruining artists. That is point 1. He opened the folder. It was a new, much shorter contract. You will tell your own story. But we will provide media training, not scripts, so you don't get overwhelmed. That is a change to your point 2. He looked up at her. Point 3. Any performance for the Foundation. You may play what you wish, but you must understand, audiences sometimes want the thing they know. You may have to play their piece and yours. That is the compromise. Elena nodded slowly. That was fair. Point 4, he said, leaning back. The story writes. This is where I cannot give you what you want. The moment in the bistro, the video it is a valuable asset to the Foundation. We will own it in perpetuity, however. He held up a finger. After the 1-year active promotion period, you have full approval over how and where it is used. You can say no to anything that feels wrong. And any future story, any future music, is entirely yours. We have no claim to what you become after this year. He slid the paper across the table to her. This is a grant agreement, not a talent contract. It outlines the scholarship, the stipend, and your limited, agreed-upon ambassador duties for 1 year. After that, you are free. No strings. Elena looked down at the document. It was maybe 5 pages long. The language was clear, simple. She could understand it. It had the things he'd said. Why? She asked softly, looking up at him. Why change it for me? Thorne smiled a little, a genuine, tired smile. Because Hidden Sparks is about finding potential. Last night, You showed more potential in that stubborn, original piece than in the perfect Chopin. The foundation's job is to fan the spark, not dictate the flame. The first contract. It is a factory model. This, he tapped the paper, is for an artist. I should have offered this version first. My mistake. Elena picked up the pen next to the document. She didn't hesitate. She signed her name. 2 months later, the world had moved on to new viral moments. Elena had moved too. She was in a small city apartment near the prestigious conservatory she had chosen. Her first semester had begun. The classes were hard, thrilling. She practiced for hours in a tiny, soundproof room that was all her own. No cameras. Once a month, she fulfilled her duty as a spark. She did an interview with a magazine about access to the arts. She visited a community center, not to perform the viral piece, but to talk to kids about finding their own voice, and she played them a bit of her own composition. It felt honest. One afternoon, she was in the foundation's offices, planning a small tour of school workshops. Thorne popped his head into the meeting room. A moment, Elena? In his office, he handed her a simple black folder. A proposal. From me, not the foundation. Inside was a plan for a new program, attached to the scholarship. It would be called The Next Key. It would take a small part of the funding and use it to provide pianos and free beginner lessons for underfunded public schools. You would be the director, Thorne said. You find the schools. You help choose the teachers. You build it. It's a lot of work on top of your studies. But it's real. Elena looked at the plan, then at him. You trust me with that? You negotiated with me and won, he said. I trust you to run a piano program. She took the folder, her heart feeling full in a way that had nothing to do with fame or money. That Thursday, she finished her last class and took the bus across town. She walked into the Rustic Fig just as the lunch crowd was thinning. Brenda was at the host stand. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Brenda yelled, coming around to hug her tightly. College girl. You slumming it? Just visiting, Elena laughed. She looked over at the corner table by the window. It was empty. She walked to the back, to the old, dusty piano. She lifted the fallboard and sat down. This time, there were no cameras. No expectations. Just the soft clatter of dishes from the kitchen. She played a scale, the notes still a little flat and breathy. Then she began to play. It was a new piece, one she was writing. It had hints of the old Chopin longing, the rhythmic drive of her gala piece, but also something new, a brighter, more hopeful melody, weaving through it. It was a work in progress. One of the new busboys stopped to listen, leaning on his mop. Brenda paused her counting, a small smile on her face. The cook nodded along. Elena played, not for a billionaire, or an audience, or a contract. She played for the joy of the sound in the quiet sunlit space. She played for herself. The waitress was gone. The viral sensation was fading. The student, the artist, was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, the music and the life were finally, completely, her own.